We've already been started recording, so I'm keeping all of this in.
Oh, fantastic.
I cut nothing. There's no editing at all. It's just, here's what happened.
Yeah, nice.
I will start, though, with a land acknowledgement.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So we are grateful to be here, located, living, working, and playing on the unceded and traditional territory of the Snuneymuxw people, part of the Coast Salish that are up and down the west coast of North America. And for all of their thousands of years of nurturing this land and being present upon it and sharing it with us, we say thank you. We say Haichka.
Haichka. Yeah, thank you. What a beautiful way to start.
Yeah, I'm so glad that Simquatan has shared with us the depth of a land acknowledgement. And I don't know if you saw when he was here last, where he talked about it's not just honoring the land.
Right.
It's bringing your ancestors with you. It's knowing that when you walk into a room, you bring all of that with you.
Yeah, isn't that beautiful?
Yeah, and that's, I don't know about you, but for me, being a Canadian kid, that's never talked about. Mm-hmm. I have I had no concept of thinking in those terms. I mean, if anything, traditionally it was like, I'm done with my family. I've got my own family now. Mm-hmm. And you don't think about all of the years that your predecessors, that your ancestors have actually been doing stuff. Right.
Oh, absolutely. And I certainly wasn't planning on going here, but for myself, like part of that is I am actually an immigrant to the country from the UK, and my family colonialism is so deep in my ancestry that on the one side, I had a grandfather who worked on the Thames with the tugboats. And so he was dealing with a lot of international trade, which was very steeped in colonialism around the world. And then on the other side, I had a great grandfather who ran a textiles company in India. So part of bringing my ancestors is uncomfortable for me.
Wow.
So that's actually been a journey that I've been on as far as reconciliation and what's my part in it is really thinking about myself as a European settler on these lands and knowing that my ancestors actually have been a part of the oppression.
Right.
And I mean, I can't do anything to erase that. So in some ways, bringing that into the room is good because it's that reminder that I can't undo what has been done, but boy, I can sure start here to create a new way forward, to be in a good way and in good relation with the First Nations here. Right?
Yeah, it's like you have an opportunity to do something fresh and new.
Yeah.
Right. And acknowledging the past.
Right.
And by the way, I've been a very rude host. We
didn't introduce ourselves.
We're speaking with Reverend Amanda Pope, Center for Spiritual Living, ordained over a year ago, correct?
Yes. Yeah. Well, not over a year. It's just coming up on a year.
Oh, coming up on a year.
Yeah.
So we're both newbies.
We are.
Look at that. Us doing a talk together for people when we really don't know anything.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, that's why I'm so excited to speak with you. Like we've been on very different but kind of parallel journeys.
Yeah.
So
it's
that's
kind
exciting.
of funny. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for sharing that because unlike yourself, I don't really know my family's history per se. I would imagine there's much colonialism in it. I know my mom's family, French Canadian, have been in Canada for a long time. Like my recollection would be 300-ish years.
Wow.
That they've been part of the land here. And whereas my father's parents, they came over just before the turn of the century, 1900s, from Belgium, which I would imagine the history of Belgium, there's a fair bit of colonialism that went on with, the history of Belgium. So, I don't know how deep it runs or what, but I can take responsibility for the fact that I'm here.
Right.
And that I am a guest here, really, in all intents and purposes, because there's been no treaty signed. There's been no agreements laid down as, yes, we are, let's all come together.
Right.
And so in that, it's kind of feels weird sometimes. I don't know about you, but for me, when I really sit and think about it, it's it's odd in a way. And not that I think, oh, I should go. I don't think that.
Right.
You know, like there's nothing that says, oh, I better get off the land. It's just that feeling of like, wow, this is a weird position to be in.
Yes.
You know, to try to acknowledge it, but at the same time know that you are actually an ancestor of the problem.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I think that's ours to grapple with. Right. And that is one of the things I really appreciate about Unity Vancouver Island is that it does very much feel like there is a sincere desire to step into that place of reconciliation. I love the conversations you've had with Sangwatan, and also just the it does feel very sincere and authentic in this openness and a willingness to learn. I mean, so much of it is just even recognizing we don't know what we don't know, right?
Yes. The great distinction.
Yeah.
There's the things I know that I don't know.
Yeah.
There's the things I know that I don't know. And then there's the things I don't know that I don't know that I don't know them.
Whoa. That
So-
just went a step too far for
Well,
me.
okay, so
Say more.
Yeah, so there's the idea, and I think Patricia and I ended up talking about this recently, but there's the idea that there's the things I don't know. So I know that I don't know how to fly an airplane.
Right.
But then there's the things that I don't know, and I don't even know that I don't know them. So I wouldn't even know
Yeah.
where to look, and it's kind of like I didn't know that there were 12 powers. If I were to take something from
Right.
Unity,
Yeah.
right? I didn't know that.
Yeah.
I would never have thought, oh, I wonder if there's 12 powers. I'll go look for them.
Yeah.
Until I heard it for the first time, I didn't know that.
Yes.
And then, so I love stuff like that in life where there's something I don't know and I didn't even know to go look for it. And then it shows up and it's like, oh, well, what does this mean?
Yeah. But then what I wonder is, I think that's a very cognitive knowing, but spiritually, perhaps we know. With the 12 powers, when you learned about them, wasn't there that inner resonance that spoke within you, the part that knew already that says, oh, yes, that resonates with me?
Yeah.
So I think that's part of what we do in this new thought movement is getting in touch with that spiritual knowing. And with that idea with reconciliation as well is there's so much we don't know and yet we feel it. I think if we can get still, even and I'm speaking very generally and collectively, I think we're in this climate change situation because we've disconnected ourselves from the earth in a lot of ways.
Right.
And I think that's all sort of tied together, but I think it creates a tension within that we may not know it cognitively and we feel like everything's fine, but we feel it on a spiritual level.
Yeah. That's a really good point, because even when I heard that distinction, there's things you don't know.
Yeah.
You don't even know that you don't know them.
Yeah.
That really resonated with me. That was like I never thought of that.
Yeah.
But now that I hear it, that makes perfect sense to me for the type of person I am. And I also really appreciate your idea of the spiritual awareness, because you're right. When for me, and I'd love to know more about your CSL experience, but for me, when I came to Unity, it was like instantly I knew, I need to be here.
Yeah.
Like not I need to be here like, oh, it's going to help me. I need to be here like, oh, this is where I'm supposed to be.
Yeah. Yeah. Your soul is calling you forward. Yeah, for sure.
So now with that in mind, I would love to know, so how did you end up at CSL? What happened?
Well, I think that's a great segue. I think my spirit called me forward. I think I've been a spiritual seeker my whole life. When I was 18, somebody gave me, it was freshly published, the Celestine Prophecy.
Okay.
And it was kind of I'd looked into Buddhism, and then I read this and I was like, what is this stuff? What is this thing out there? I'd even tried certain religions, and even Buddhism for me has I kind of reach my edges in some of it with, I'm not great. This is my personality. I'm not great with a lot of rules and tradition, and we can't do that, and we must do this. The minute I get into that territory, there's an inner rebel in me that's
right.
I don't think so.
Not going there.
Yeah, exactly. So, it started with Celestine prophecy, and then I was sort of seeking and looking. I was a part of a Unitarian church for a long time, and I loved that idea of coming to a place where people are interested in spirituality without the kind of boundaries of traditional religion, and then they also have this piece of social justice. And that sort of was part of the building block for my spiritual identity, which is where that place where it kind of, we combine our personal well-being with caring for the world in a way that isn't dogmatic and doesn't have all these everybody must be the same and do this the same way. So when I walked into a Center for Spiritual Living in Kelowna, I was just like, what? This is speaking my language, and that idea of the wisdom's in me. I don't have to defer to anything outside of me. That's pretty great.
Yeah.
And then sort of conversely, that there is a power bigger than I am that I can surrender to in the moments where I don't know what I don't know because I'm in my teeny tiny limited perspective.
Yeah.
So that just, it called to me on that really deep heart, spirit level, and I haven't looked back. But as you said, like that, just getting into it and being called and recognizing something in it, and yet there was no rational reason.
Yeah.
I was quite happy with my spiritual path. Becoming a minister was not something that I really saw.
That's not rational.
That's not rational in this day and age, Thomas. We've done something very irrational.
It's true.
It is
true.
Yes.
I do enjoy what you said there about the idea of that there's this inner knowing almost that just kind of nudges you. Like that's how it was for me. It just felt like there was like a bump.
Yeah.
All of a sudden it was like, hey dude, wake up.
Yeah.
Wake the heck up and get on with this. And it almost felt like I was talking to myself. I don't know if you had that experience, but it felt like there was a dual thing going on, which also another thing you touched on was the idea that people are going to defer to something outside themselves. At least my experience has been that most people come from an upbringing where they are taught to look outside of themselves for all the answers.
Right.
And it's so hard to learn and realize that it's actually what you need.
Yeah. It's all within us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You don't actually need to go to any guru, any spiritual center. I mean, as Reverend Patricia often has told me, through mentoring me, is that your job is to become irrelevant.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And I think there's that piece of it. It's something that's sort of really on my heart for the world right now. The world is complex. Like when people start talking about different, artificial intelligence and this whole world kind of beyond what the average person knows about and can conceive of, it creates this complexity of the world with climate change that I think we're in a place that can call people to this, looking for that person out, that authoritative figure out there that says, if you do this, this, and this, everything will be fine. If you behave the way I tell you, the world will be saved. And I think that really opens us up. And as people leave traditional religion, I think that opens up a sort of vulnerability to perhaps some ill-intentioned kind of forces of people saying, "Oh, I have the answer for you." So I think, and maybe that's what called me to ministry, is I think right now, if ever, that idea that we really encourage people and empower them to be embodied in their own bodies, in their own spirit, knowing that answer's within them, their reassurance is within them, their well-being's within them, and that there isn't a need for that thing out there. Yeah. And I think that's really, kind of what the world, where we are today really requires from us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I can get on side with that. I know for me as a musician, because for me, spirituality really started with a concept of music. For me, playing music is a very spiritual experience. When you write your own songs, when you're in a group, kind of like a tribe, and you're connecting on a level where you're creative together and things just happen. Like you're just jamming and magic. I don't even know what other word to use than magic. Magic kind of happens.
Yeah.
And there's a whole feeling inside that goes beyond anything I can explain. You know, and I used to sort of share it in the idea of like sex doesn't come close to it. When you are completely united on a stage with a group of people and a crowd, and you're all in this energy field together, it's beyond anything I can explain. It's magic.
Yeah.
Right. And that for me was that spiritual thing that I wanted to share. And once I stopped playing music, I think there was a period of time where I was really looking for how can I share something that has value, that has meaning to me.
Yeah, yeah.
And that's when unity kind of showed up, when I had come to a place where it's like, I really need to do something that is creative. Because even though ministry has, you know, they have the schooling, I don't know about your schooling, but mine was very like, you must learn this and this and this and this.
Yeah.
Inside of that is this idea that I can create how I am going to deliver the message.
Yeah.
How I'm going to show up. Well, you know, if you're trying to figure this out, here's what's worked for me.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right?
And that's what I love. You know, in our teaching around that, you know, spirit is individualized in me. So what I bring to ministry is going to be completely different than what you bring. And I really see that in us. I mean, we're very different people. We have different outlooks and perspectives on life. And spirit expresses through us in different ways. But it turns out to be a beautiful thing. And I love what you talk about with that magic, because I think when we are so aligned with that, our individualization of spirit, it is that effortless, like our limited perspectives, our kind of like ego, connection, control of the situation gets out of the way. And then spirit just does filter. It's like that light that's being focused, right? It gets to focus through us without us putting all these filters and these things in front of it that we think that will look better, or somebody else worked for someone else. It's this pure light. And then that joins, you know, in the example of music, that joins with someone else's pure light. And you guys have fantastic music here. And there are those moments where you guys just all come together and we're all into it. And it is a beautiful thing. Yeah,
it is. And even the mistakes don't matter.
No,
they become comedy.
Yeah,
because you know, I'll know, especially with Joshua, in talking about music with Joshua, him and I just make up endings on the spot.
Nice.
And sometimes they're wonderful.
Yeah.
And sometimes they're messy. And it's all perfect. Like there's no, we can just laugh about it, that, you know, we weren't really feeling it in that moment, or we were a little off, but it doesn't matter because it kind of works out in the end.
Yeah.
So yeah, like for me, the playing of music is just such a great analogy for how spirit works.
For sure.
Now, you said something about, you brought up AI. So I have to share something. I just recently watched a YouTube on the dangers of AI. Not from a place of, oh, we should not have it, but from a place of, if we don't. So I think the premise of the two speakers was that in every instance where we've had breakthroughs in technology, rules have been far behind them. And when that happens, it can run amok and cause a lot of challenge before we start implementing rules. And one of the things they highlighted was like algorithms in social media.
Yes.
All the time, the social media platforms have been working on, how do we hijack people to stay on our platform? Not from a place of, we're going to get them, but from a place of a business model, thinking we need to figure out how to keep people on our platform. And they figured out the amygdala and, you know, the base going right down to our reptilian brain.
Yeah.
What will trigger us to stay there? And then they went after mastering it.
Right.
Now there are unintended consequences from that, which our children have been completely hijacked by this need to be noticed, this fixation that they have with being seen or getting a like or all of that stuff.
Right.
And it's because we have no rules, or we had no rules of engagement around it.
Yeah.
I know this is kind of long-winded, but they were talking about AI, and here's the thing that kind of grabbed me, because I'm curious if CSL is the same. So in Unity, I take language to be extremely important. The words that we speak, our power is in our word.
Mm-hmm.
So 2017, AI was a whole bunch of different camps, all working on different ideas, and none of them communicated with one another. And suddenly they realized if they put it all into language, so now you can type in a word and it'll create music. You can type in a series of words and it'll create art. You can use ChatGPT to build blogs. Like, once they figured out that, it's actually in language, now everything is devised on language, and it's exponentially outgrowing any predictions they had for AI, to the point now where AI is, through the language, is actually creating its own things that they're not even knowing is happening in the background.
Yeah.
So two things there. One is, I'm curious about CSL's stand on language, because I really see the word from Genesis. The word is God. Not, some being outside of us, but the power in word.
Yes.
And when I heard that, I was just like, oh my gosh.
Here is that made manifest, right?
In
like
machine
literally.
learning, they actually broke all their boundaries
through language.
Through understanding that the power is in the word.
Yeah. Yeah, that is quite something, isn't it? Yeah, and absolutely. So Centers for Spiritual Living, their philosophy is called the Science of Mind, and it was there's a sort of seminal text that was written by a guy named Ernest Holmes in the early 1920s, and absolutely his sort of premise is, that thought plus feeling equals manifestation. And that idea that our belief systems that are communicated through our language really create our experiences. So absolutely, we're very similar in that sort of philosophical perspective. And yeah, I think that I hadn't thought about like the actual adding language to it, but I really think that AI is such an interesting, like, we're being faced with things out of our control. I think we've gone through this whole time of scientific, technological development that gave us this false sense of we control everything. And I think the climate is showing us, not so much. And I think AI is doing the same thing, where we're like, wow, now we put something out there, it can actually keep processing without our input. And I think that can be used for amazing good. Like the scientists, I listen to a lot of interviews around it, and the scientists are saying, this is amazing. There is so much data in the world, and a lot of the what holds back scientific discovery is the resources to mine through that data and find those patterns and things. But now that's going to be exponentially faster. So it's an exciting time. But I agree with you, what are the consequences socially? How does that impact us? How do we do this in a safe way? Like, those are important questions.
Yeah, we have no boundaries right now. That's the thing. And it's just a race to see who can jack it up even more without any thought to what actually might happen from that. So it's kind of scary in that way, right? But I'm not somebody that wants to live in fear of something. Right. But you just triggered me with that idea of AI, and then it's, for me, it's language. It's like, when I heard that, I was like, brings it back to some solid grounding teachings for me. Yeah. Absolutely. So you mentioned off the top, there was a text you read.
The Science of Mind?
Nope, before that.
Celestine Prophecy.
Yes. So I don't know what that is.
You don't?
I don't. Oh. I know. I was sitting there when you said it, and I was like, Do I tell people I don't know what that is? Is this like an embarrassment moment? Should I feel shame
Not
as a
at
minister?
all.
No, I'm kidding.
Not at all.
And I suspect there might be people out there listening who may not know what that is either.
Yeah. Okay. So, yeah, it was sort of a cult classic in that, when would it have been? Sort of like the early 90s. And it was this, I wish I'd looked up the author's name. It's not coming to me.
I'll see if I can put it in the text. If
Okay.
I remember, I'll put it in the text down below.
Yeah. But it was this exploration of, I think, consciousness and the development of consciousness.
Okay.
And it's been so long now. I don't remember all the details of it, but there were talking about kind of that control. I think he would use the one who used the term control dramas. We come at life with these ways of trying to control that kind of ego-driven place, and that we actually can find that place of community, of collaboration, that's that higher frequency, that higher consciousness. So it's sort of that journey, and it became this really big thing that people were reading all over the place, and there were a couple of books after that as well.
Right. So when you read that sparked. Is that sort of like a ground zero?
Absolutely. I was like, I don't know what this is, but I want to know more. And it spoke to that inner something in me that said, yeah, there is something more and beyond.
Interesting. So as you were sharing that, I was trying to think like, well, I wonder, what is there that kind of resonated with me or that started me on a journey? And what came up, which might seem really weird, was Atlas Shrugged by Ayn Rand.
Wow.
Which I've read, I think 5 or 6 times I've read that book.
Yeah.
And it was the idea, what I think resonates with me in it is the idea of the freedom and the will to choose and do things. Not the freedom from a place of, I get to do whatever I want in spite of everybody else, but the freedom that I should be allowed to explore abilities and strengths that I have to determine who I am as a person, right? Like without harming others. Like I've always had this philosophy that was kind of like, if I'm not hurting others and you're not hurting yourself,
go for it.
Yeah, you're probably okay, right?
Yeah.
That's as much religion as I needed for most of my life was to stand on that principle. But I think it kind of stems from that book, which is kind of odd because I've heard a lot of, naysayers about that book and about Ayn Rand's philosophy on politics and pretty right wing and all of that stuff. But that's not what I took away from it in an odd way. I took away the creative of humanity, that we have an ability. And as soon as we start to crush that in people, we're doomed. Like as soon as we say what you can think or can't think or any of that stuff, we're in trouble.
Right.
Because that is how we get through things.
Right.
And maybe I falsely believe that we will choose the right path if we are open to the dialogue that needs to be spoken, right?
Yeah.
Eventually we'll get to the right place of, that doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. Like I do have faith in humanity. I think at our core, even if it's not, like I like to put a whole personify lovely, we love everything and we have love at our core, but even just for survival, I think we have within us, we want what is good, not just for ourselves, but for all. And I think you're absolutely right. As we get sort of removed from ourselves, we lose track of that. We get into a world where things are, there are these inequities and we're not caring for the planet and all that kind of stuff. But if we can go back to that pure essence within us, I think we do all have that desire for peace, for connectivity, for care of our each other and the planet. So I think it's powerful. So in Science of Mind, that's a big piece of it, is we have free will. Spirit is this beautiful organizing principle that is light and wholeness and love, and we have the ability to use it in whatever way we choose. So we can focus on everything that is wrong in our lives, and that will be our experience. And there is no spirit that's going to step in and say and fix it for us. But we can use that power to align with it and have a greater experience. So that's sort of in a nutshell. But there's a new book out by Robert Sapolsky. Do you know who he is?
Nope.
He wrote a book on stress. He did a lot of research on stress. He's just written a book about, basically he's saying there is no free will. He really is, and he's drilled down. It's fascinating to me. I'm sure there are a lot of people in our movement who are like, how dare she say that? But right. I think, I love those hard
Sacrilege.
questions. That's right. And our movement says we're open at the top, and I'm
Burn
like,
her at the stake. Here we go.
Right. Here we are at the top. So, but I think it's a really great thing to explore. And really, he drills down into the experience each of us is having right now. We can say, oh, well, I went to school, I studied, I did this, and I work hard. Ooh. That was my watch. Yeah. I worked hard and...
trying to help you out, actually. I think it was Siri or something, right?
Stop talking. You're going to be excommunicated. So that, we think about, I work hard, I'm disciplined, I eat the right things, I work out. And he said, actually, if you drill down far enough, that's not really true. That, you've even talked about people who are very athletic and physically fit, that they often will have that, that dopamine response that comes in when you exercise. Yep. The people who stick with it and tend to be the fittest tend to have that dopamine response really early. So they start working out and it kicks in. And then the people who don't so much, that comes later. So they they get tired before that right. They get the reward. Right. And the same thing with, muscle regeneration. Like some people are sore for much longer and other people bounce back faster. So I thought it was just so fascinating. And what he said is, often we blame people for their situations in lives. Like even if we want to really get into the icky, what does this mean? People who are in the criminal justice system, like how much of that we have a tendency to say, this is your fault, you've made bad choices. But right. If we can look at it from a cultural, biological, social perspective, that maybe they don't have a lot of free will in the world, and their genetics have sort of set them up for that. Yeah. Which also means that we can't take credit for our successes.
Sure.
Yeah.
You know what's fascinating? As soon as you said it, so, let me just preface this with, so when I do something like a burning bowl, a word of the year, when I go into meditation with a question, I will very quickly, usually intuitively come up with an answer. And I've trained myself to understand that that's true for me. So as soon as you said that, ask the question, do we really have free will? I thought immediately what popped into my head was, no, I've probably been trained for everything that I'm experiencing right now is all preconditioned training from everything I've gone through. Yeah. That even though I might think that I am freely making a choice, which I may be freely making a choice, if we were to pull back the layers, it probably comes from a belief system that I have or that I have been indoctrinated into in some capacity that I'm not really aware of.
Yeah, and that's great. And I think that's a good example because it's not all bad.
No, it's not a bad thing.
Yeah, we can condition ourselves. I think just to be aware of how much we are influenced by all of that, one, I think makes us kinder to those that perhaps we judge as making bad choices. And
we judge?
You judge?
Thank you. Thank you for clarifying that. I judge. Correct.
As do I. Yes. But I think that as a society, it I think can really change our perspectives, but also that it allows us that understanding of ourselves. And then we can use that to actually support what we want in our lives. So I don't think it's as shocking that our whole belief system's going to crumble in front of us.
No. And actually, while you were sharing that, I just thought of our subconscious, right? There's like the free will is, I have it in my head. Here's an example, and this is just something I've noticed as a very dear person to me noted that perhaps what's happening at this stage of my life is that all of the bulk and strength that used to be up here has found its way down to my waistline. It's like, well, thank you. And, but I was complaining about it. So I invited the conversation. But with that in mind, if I'm sitting here thinking, the last couple of years, I haven't been as conscientious about what I eat, and it's starting to show up. I now have a choice that I can just eat the donut because my subconscious mind is going, I really want this donut right now and you should get this fix. And I just do it without even thinking. Or I do have the free will in that moment to choose no because I'm actually wanting something else for my life. And at the same time can be true is that I really don't have a free will. That the donut is being eaten because I've conditioned myself to eat the donut.
Right.
Like
Yes.
both things are true at the same time.
Yeah.
And in that moment, I do have a choice.
Yes, and I think to dig a little deeper, is it strikes me you actually have a pretty strong sense of discipline. That when you say I want to change something in my life, you are pretty good, and you've got a lot of experience of doing that and successes to build on. So again, I think that unique to you, whereas perhaps another person in that situation may not have that same sort of tendency and combination of brain firing, cultural background, social
or even
systems.
having had success at anything. That's a really great point. Something I don't think about a lot, but the reason I might be able to complete things is because I have completed things. Right?
Yeah.
Like I can do this.
Right.
And somebody who hasn't had that experience at any point, maybe has never had a victory at that level for themselves, could continually struggle with everything that comes along because they don't know what that looks like.
Right. Or they've never had somebody in their lives, in their family, who's had that experience.
Or supported them enough to help them get to the finish line. I don't know about you, but completing your ministry to being ordained, I am certain there must have been people that supported you.
There were a lot. A whole village supported me. Absolutely.
It's not done just I'm doing this
Yeah.
Right?
And we can see that because of that support, because of my privilege to be able to do it. And there's all kinds of pieces and I just happen to have a very kind of academic brain that is good at writing papers and churning out all that material we had to produce and the consciousness as well. Obviously they were developing both at the same time.
I like to think of it as churning out fluff.
Nice.
Well, it's a bit of a game, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's like you know what they're looking for. So if you know what they're looking for, you can kind of feed it.
Yeah, that's true.
Right?
Yeah.
There's a bit of, to me, there was like, and I'd love to know your experience. And I know we went to different organizations for this, but part of my experience was I know what they're after. I just need to give it to them. Like not fight the system. And if I just give it to them, I can go do whatever I'm going to do later. Yeah. But I just need to give them what they're looking for. And if you approach it that way, you can actually see clearly what they're looking for.
You're speaking to the adult educator in me.
Right.
Because, yes. And so often schooling is set up like that. The academic world is set up and it is a system that you get to know your instructor, you get to know what they want from you, and you meet those targets. And is that, from your perspective, was that the place where you really developed from within? Or was that the place where you got into your mind, you made yourself a cup of tea and you churned out the paper that you knew they wanted?
Right.
And so from my perspective, like that's the beauty of education, when we can, instead of having just these check boxes of I did all these things, we can create this environment that calls us into digging deep within ourselves. Because honestly, what is ministry but being able to be so in touch with our own humanity and our own depths so that we can call that forward from other
Right.
people, right?
Right. So I think there was two things at work. One is in the exercise of completing papers, I learned some things.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So there is learning, being forced to read things that I would not have sought out to read.
Yes.
And then reading them and having aha moments from them. So there was that. But I think where for me, the real learning happened was the experiential in the classroom.
Yeah.
With my fellow students who were having aha moments themselves and setting up the groundwork to share.
Yeah. Oh,
You
for
know,
sure.
like,
yeah.
And this brings me into something I've thought a lot about, the Sunday experience. I actually don't enjoy the Sunday experience because it's a person talking with no feedback.
Yeah. It's a one way.
It's a
for
one
sure.
way.
Yeah.
And I would much rather sit around and have a conversation
Yeah.
where some ideas are thrown out and people who are probably, in some cases, way more spiritual than I am, way more well-read than I am,
Yeah.
had way different experiences than I have had, obviously, and
Yeah.
can bring a perspective that I don't have.
I agree. Yeah, sometimes I'm giving a talk and I think, I really want to know what that person thinks about this because I know their perspective's different than mine. Like
Yeah.
I have that for sure. But, I think there is a value. I think those Sunday experiences are about ritual. They're about that place of sometimes you just need that soft place to fall each week to bring us back. But it's certainly, I agree with you. It's not where that big development piece happens. As an educator, there's this thing we call transformative education. And that's that idea that, we are transformed. We didn't just learn knowledge, we're transformed, and how we interact with the world changes. And that requires things like dialogue. It requires us to be reflecting on our own experience and our beliefs and looking for new ways. So you're absolutely right. It doesn't fill that on a Sunday morning. For sure.
Yeah, I see Sunday more as the opportunity to maybe plant some seeds.
Yeah.
To sprinkle some stuff into the garden and see what lands. But in an ideal world for me, to be sitting amongst people and having conversation and dialogue and sharing stories would be, that would be the ultimate.
For sure.
So
yeah.
I'm not quite sure how to set that up yet. But.
Yeah. And as you said, like with education, I think that, the transformative piece, the plumbing the depths of our soul, I mean, there's a place for both, right? I mean, if you go to a surgeon, like I don't care that they've plumbed the depths of their soul. I want to know that they can perform surgery on me really well and they're going to do what they're meant to do, right?
I don't care what the philosophy on life
That's
is.
right.
Right.
I mean, I want them to be well, but that's not my top priority in that moment, right?
Yeah.
So,
Do they know their stuff?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and in ministry, I think some of that is important too. I think our roles are. I think our roles are very important, and there's a lot we need to do and do well to create that space. I think it's a big responsibility. I think to walk into a space and to call something quite vulnerable forward from people has a level of responsibility that I think should be taken seriously and needs some very formal education.
Yeah, that's actually one of the things I appreciated about Unity was the depth of responsibility that I was taking on was really stressed. That's the word I'm looking for. They really stressed that and put in a lot of what I think is a lot of ways to gauge whether you're competent at or not at dealing with people. Like lots of stuff around triangulation, creating power triangles inside of ministry. This group of people over here against this group of people over here with the minister in the middle playing both sides. Like all of that stuff are things that I never would have considered going into the role. Yet when you stand back for a moment, you can see how easy it would be to create these environments where you're actually pitting people against one another.
Right. Yeah. And that's fantastic. That was covered in your
Did you guys
education.
have much of that? Or?
Yeah. I mean, we certainly covered ethics and leadership. And I'm not sure we got into it as specifically, but I was thinking about, you'd said your experiences came, real learning experiences came from the interaction with the students. But I know for you had a real apprenticeship model too. You were here doing the work and supported by an amazing mentor and leader in Reverend Patricia. And you had the space. And what a beautiful combination where you're doing the work, then you go and you talk about it with some colleagues and teachers, and then you come back and do the work, and you get to grow and expand in that.
Yeah, it was really, and I was actually going to ask you about that, if you have mentors now or if you have people that you can lean on. For me, it was kind of like, if you think of it as being on the court, I got to be on the court while being coached, and then going to practice, which was the school, to hear more things that I needed to work on, then to go into the court of being live and really just like, hey, I just learned this. I'm now going to talk about it.
Yeah.
I don't really know anything. I only know what I just learned in class, but through that execution of speaking about it, you're forced to learn more about it. Like you learn, and for me at least, I'm the kind of person, I learn more when I actually dive into talking about something. Yeah. Trying to teach it is when I really get to learn it. Right. Right. And so I absolutely had that in spades. Like, I was gifted a beautiful place to land, to be able to have the best of all of it. I had a great mentor who was completely hands off, but hands-on when I needed it. And then I had a space, a beautiful community that was willing to let me practice in all of the greenery that I was. And then I had a school that was supportive of me having a classroom to go into to speak with other students. Right.
Yeah. And I think that's a beautiful environment, like for all of us when we're learning something, is to create those spaces, the space where you get to try it out, the space where you get to connect with the other people who are trying it out and figuring it out, and then the place where you get to connect with the people who've been doing it a long time and have some things to teach you. And I think we can all take that to every area of our lives, right? It's it's a system that works.
Yeah.
For sure.
Well, it's kind of like professional sports teams. That's how the best functioning professional sports teams are set up in a manner where you're on the court, you have the practice space to do it where you can share and reflect, and then you probably have leadership who have all been there before.
Right.
Especially winning championships. The more that you can surround your newbies with championship players that have, or coaches that have done that before, then they trust. Oh, I'm getting the right, I'm getting the right teachings at the right moment, when I need them. Yeah. That's so what was it like for you? Do you have mentors now? Do you have people that you can lean on a regular? Because I know you've moved here to the island, and I'd like to talk a little bit about that as well. What you guys are up to here, but you've moved here, started something. There's probably not a whole wealth of people behind you right here that you can lean on.
Right. Yeah. It was that was a big move. I had a similar situation to you where I was working very. Actually full-time for a while within a community while I was doing my ministerial training. And I'd been within that community for a long time. So I really, again, I felt that sort of apprenticeship model too. So moving here, that was a big piece of it, is that now we moved and we started our own spiritual community, and that can be a little bit of an isolating experience, especially as somebody new. And so I knew that I needed to build that mentorship around me. We have a beautiful, amazing board of directors. We're a nonprofit society, and we have just this depth of wisdom. And these are these people who are just generous. Like, I phone them up and say, we don't know what this is. We don't know what it's going to look like. Will you support us and show up and be on our board? And they said yes, and they hold us up, which is an amazing experience. And I did. I'm a big believer in mentorship. So we part of the system of graduating is you do actually have a sponsor and a mentor for a few years in our system. And so I was very clear that I was looking for two people who were very different, but had lots of experience and excellence in the things they did. And I feel very, very supported by that. So it's, and now our community is lifting us up, which is such a beautiful thing.
Yeah. That would be, I really take my hat off for that, to go to a place and start something. I certainly haven't done that. I've kind of like fallen into a lap of like, hey, this is easy. You just show up and there's a spiritual community.
And there they are.
There they are. They're people. They come every Sunday. They're online. It's amazing.
Yeah.
That's so simple.
That's right. Yeah.
Whereas you and Derek have had to
find our first person.
Yeah.
Like person number one we
Yeah.
had to find. Yeah. It was something.
That's daunting.
Yeah, but it's, I'm interested, as you know, in like that big questions, that kind of edge of things. So I really wanted to explore what's spiritual community in this day and age that's relevant, that's fresh, that really meets the needs of the community that we're in. So to me, it's been a really lovely experiment. I wanted to come in and in a good way into Vancouver Island and Nanaimo and fit in. I didn't, and again, this is sort of at that era of kind of that reconciliation place. Like, how do we come in a good way where, we did a lot of work on kind of looking at, acknowledging the territory we were moving into, and how can we do that in a gentle way, and looking at the other spiritual communities that are here. I love that we're very collaborative with the Unity Center. And so looking at, like, the last thing Nanaimo needs is one more kind of Sunday service to choose from. Unity does such a beautiful Sunday service here. So we thought, okay, well, what then is something that would complement what is already going on? So that's been what we've been looking for. And I really wanted to be in service to the community. So that's a big spirit. So we started with a free meditation at the library that's still running every week, and it's a beautiful thing, and it really attracts people. It's low barrier, like you don't have to sign up, you don't have to say I believe in these things. You come, you show up, and it's a group of people, different number each week, different group of people, and we sit together in silence and we focus on peace and harmony and goodness.
Wow.
And it feels very powerful.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah. As you were sharing that and the Unity perspective, or the Unity Center here, I was thinking of Rev Patricia, and her willingness to support you, which is not what a lot of ministers from they would see you as competition.
Right. Yeah.
Like if there's anybody I've met that has lived on the creative plane and not the competitive plane, it is Rev P.
Yeah.
Like, I just want to throw some,
that is absolutely her gift.
Some jam out to her right now.
Yes.
That like, even what she's allowed me to do, never her ego getting in the way. And I don't know what she's thinking, between the shots, so to speak. Maybe she is having to battle, like, how much power do I give this person? How much support do I give them? And are they going to take away my job? Or are they going to take people away from Unity Spiritual Center? Like, all of those things would be the human consciousness that would show up. And yet she just manages to come play. Let's go.
Absolutely.
We're all talking about the same thing.
Yeah, she is a powerful leader. And speaking of mentorship, I'm so grateful to know her here and to see that grace that she leads with, and that just that inner certainty. I feel the same thing from her, that it is, she is here for the greater good.
Yeah.
And it isn't about, well, here's my piece of it and here's your piece and don't take my piece.
Yeah.
She really embodies and lives that idea of collaboration, expansion of, we are all one. And it's fantastic.
Yeah. And I don't know that I'm there personally.
Yeah.
Like, I struggle with,
for sure,
what is my role going to be and what's my little, piece of turf.
Yeah.
Right. Like, so to see that in action is a great gift. It's like,
absolutely.
Oh, wait, there's another way.
Yes. I love that. And for us as new ministers, I think we are so blessed to have that vision held up in front of us. Yeah. Yeah.
So how can people connect with CSL here? Like, what can people do to be part of the community? For sure. They can check us out on cslnanaimo.org, and we're on social media on Facebook and Instagram, and we just have
some different events happening. We're starting a spiritual gathering in a karaoke bar this month, which should be fun. And we have an online discussion. So we just find different ways, and it's kind of we're really coming at it with that spirit of come check us out. If it is a thing that fits into your life and uplifts you, great. If it's not for you, that's okay too. Like we just really want to be open and in collaboration.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, Reverend Amanda Pope, Center for Spiritual Living here on Vancouver Island in Nanaimo. Thank you for being with me today.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, namaste.
Mm-hmm.